Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition or episode of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 38. We've managed to make it to 38 episodes over the last year and a half. We've been virtually traveling around the UK, and on the rare occasion we leave Great Britain to go elsewhere to chat to devotees about their topics, their projects, their interests, all the things that kind of makes them, so to speak. And it's great to know and to see and to hear that so many of you, around 1,000 of you, are tuning in every week to hear the devotee's story. And we've really touched on some quite fascinating stories over the last couple of months, such as LGBT issues, issues around suicide, issues around mental health, all really, really important topics that we as devotees should feel comfortable talking about. Yes, I myself am trying to practice Krishna consciousness. I'm also a human being living in Great Britain that has real thoughts, feelings, and emotions. It's not easy to switch all of those off. I am really, really pleased to welcome our guest this week. It's great to welcome Govardhan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for joining us this week. I was thinking earlier this morning, I think you and I first met around 5 years ago, possibly. It was in Scotland, and Hridayananda Maharaj was doing like a speaking tour of Scotland, and we both went to some of the events, and I remember then meeting you briefly then. So that was my first kind of encounter with you, and I remember then seeing on social media quite a bit that you're a real, I don't know, spokesperson or kind of a soldier for Krishna consciousness out on the street doing Harinam and everything in the north of England. So I'm really pleased that you've accepted the invitation to come on the show this week. So let's start by telling us a bit about you and where you're from.
I'm from Preston in Lancashire, along with Sakshi Gopal Das, who's also from Preston. So Srila Prabhupada initiated 2 people from my town. And that's the answer to that question. That's where I'm from.
I have to say, there's a very good restaurant in Preston. I was there about 3 years ago. I was going to a Hare Krishna festival nearby, and I went to a very nice kind of Gujarati pure veg restaurant called R&K. So whenever I think of Preston, I always think of that restaurant.
Well, I'm glad you found something positive to say about Preston. Not everyone does.
There's a big little as well. Okay, so tell us a bit about you in terms of how long have you been around the Hare Krishna movement? How did you get involved?
Well, it is 50 years since I met the devotees, and it's 49 and a half years since I moved into the temple, which was the way that it happened at that time. How I got involved was that I wanted to know about God. I wanted to know about the meaning of life. What was I doing here? What was it all about? This is at the age of 15, 16. And when I was 14 or 15, I became a vegetarian, because one day I came home from school and my mother was cooking something non-veg in the kitchen, for my lunch. And I could perceive that it was an animal's body. So from that moment, I didn't eat any more meat, which posed a bit of a problem for my mum. In those days, there was no vegetarian, anything really. But there was a health food shop, so she got me some cashew nuts, and she tried to supplement my diet like that. So I'd become a vegetarian, and I was looking about me. And at that time, there used to be programs on telly every Sunday, and people would come on talking about their Christianity. And I felt like I want to have that kind of understanding, conviction. I want to understand why I'm here. And I went and visited quite a few religious sort of, institutions. I remember going to a synagogue, and I was in a philosophy group, and I got initiated into the Transcendental Meditation of the Maharishi, just like that. It was in Bolton, I think. I remember having to take a flower. I think I took a flower, and I think it was 35 quid to get the mantra, which was that was my mantra. And I fell asleep many a time chanting that. But, just to say that I was a spiritual seeker. And something that came up when I was talking to Mathura Das, if he's watching, hi Val, I think he's amazing. I love him. I've only just met him actually, and I think he's just wonderful. He was surprised. He said I should write a book. I should write my story. Maybe I will. But I wasn't into drugs or anything like that. You know, I was a very straight person, a schoolgirl, basically. So I visited different places and nothing really grabbed me, and I met devotees on the street. A few things happened. One was that I met a devotee on the street, and I was with my friend Brenda, and it was during the school holidays between the end of the 5th year, what's called the 5th year, when you've done your O-levels, and the 6th form college type situation. So I was in town with my friend Brenda, and we saw a Hare Krishna, and I can't, you know, when things are a long time ago, this is 50 years ago now, you can't remember exactly who said what. And one of us said, let's go and talk to him. And the other one said, no, they're mad. And I really don't remember who said what. But we went across and talked to this guy who I later found out was Tanumadja. And he was saying that, you know, the women in our movement have really happy lives. Men are just going to want you for sex, is what he said, you know. And I bought 2 little books, and he told us lots and lots of things on the streets. And I was on the way to my nanny and granddad's, you know. I hope I get to mention in this talk interview that I had 4 major caregivers, you know, in my childhood. And my nanny and granddad were 2 of them. And I was on my way to their house. So this guy in the street had told us that, you know, you can perceive that you're not this body by when you chant Hare Krishna. So I went straight up into the spare bedroom, and I got to my nanny's, and I lay on the bed and began to chant Hare Krishna, getting the words from the book. Nothing happened actually, but anyway. Different things happened, you know, to sort of like, I had seen the devotees when I was a little bit younger on Top of the Pops. And this might get boring now, a few things happened. One thing was that, and I can't remember the order of them, there was a shop, a record shop, and they were letting you listen to the records. You know, there was like a you know, what do you call those, headphone, and you could put it on and listen. And I found this Govardhan, you know, the Hare Krishna temple record. And I put it on, and it's like I heard spirit, you know, I heard this like da 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 da, and I was like, you know, it's like, what is that? That's the first time I've ever used my ears. That's proper sound. I've never ever heard that before. This is before the words even started. So then I bought the record, obviously, took it home, and my dad was not happy because he hated everything Indian, everything foreign. He hated all that. He was Enoch Powell's man, you know. So I managed to keep this record, and I wrote, because I read about the Aarti ceremony, and I wrote to the temple in London to see if I could attend. But I wanted to know what it was, because I didn't want to do anything weird, you know, the Aarti ceremony. So I got a letter back from Dhananjaya, who said, you know, it's just articles that are offered on behalf of the congregation. And I never actually went to that, but I ended up going to Manchester and joining up 2 weeks later.
So this was around 1972.
It was 1972 when I met the devotees, and in the January of 1973 is when we visited Manchester. I managed to get there from Preston, and it was the first time, apart from one trip that I made to the Crucible in, where is the Crucible? Is it in Sheffield?
I have to say I have no idea.
Somewhere in the north called the Crucible, and I actually made my way there on my own on the buses at 16, because I was and still am, a fan of Shakespeare, a fan of all that's beautiful in language. And I'll never forget that performance. Anyway, I made my way there once on my own, and then this is my second trip out of Preston on my own, and I went to the temple and had some wonderful experiences there with the devotees. And after I'd been going about, 10 days and, sneaking off college, because by that time my first year of A-levels had started, I said, they said to me, you're too young to join the movement in England. You would have to get parental permission. So we're going to visit Scotland, where the age of majority is 16. So come along with us, you can join the movement. So there was me, and there was this woman called, I forget, her name was Ruth at the time, and she and I had been going to visit at the same time, plus Yashaswini. We'd all been there at the same time, and myself and Yashaswini, I think she was tied up for a few weeks more, but myself and Ruth were supposed to join. So she didn't show up, but this Ruth, she actually later paid for Soho Street Temple.
She paid for it?
She paid for Soho Street Temple in time. Anyway, she didn't show up. I was joining Hare Krishna with this Ruth, we're going to go up together. And I got to the temple in Manchester, and it was my birthday, the day I arrived. My birthday was the 2nd of February. And I'm leaving on the 1st of February. My mum gave me £5 for my birthday, and which was a lot in those days. And I bought a sleeping bag because I'd been told that we don't have beds, we sleep on the floor. So I bought a sleeping bag in town, and I went to Manchester with all my possessions, and got into a van and was driven to Scotland. And I remember swinging around, dropping off and swinging around the corner of Forest Road, which is all lit up. It was like fairyland, and just swinging around that corner and waking up. And it was like, again, entering sort of like a different zone, different dimension. Would it lower the tone if I told you that there was somebody with his little hand on my leg on the way up? Would it lower the tone?
You can talk about anything you want. I've got some questions to come back to you in a minute, but yeah, you can say anything you want.
That's what happened. And I'm thinking, because the only time I got to ride in the front, because there were no seats in the vans, it was amazing. No seats in the vans in those days. It was like, cattle being transported. But because I was just joining, I was allowed to sit in the front. And there was a bloke with me who was going up to get married. And, during the course of the journey, his hand's on my knee. I'm thinking, like, what's this, Anyway, I was never to be in that position again, because I never got to have a seat anymore after that. I was always on the back, on the floor.
So this was another devotee?
Yes.
Who was off to get married?
It was going up to meet his wife.
Okay.
His the person he was going to get married to. He hadn't obviously met her yet, but there we are.
Okay, all right. So I have a question. One question about your childhood. So you talked about,
Yes.
you lots of caregivers, your grandparents. Your father was an Enoch Powell man.
Yeah.
Did you have any type of religious upbringing?
Well, I went to a Methodist school. Many schools at that time had a religious, name to them, and I think in every school, if I'm not mistaken, even during secondary, we had hymns every morning. We had the assembly in the morning. And I always remember one time singing the hymn one morning, I was really getting into it. And when you feel someone's looking at you, I thought, I'm into this hymn here, And then I looked aside, and there was one of the teachers looking at me, and I was kind of really like pretending I was on telly or something, singing this hymn. But it's so great to have had that, because when you go to a funeral or a wedding, you got a chance of knowing the hymns. Whereas when I made my way into teaching, into sort of like, mainstream teaching, by the time I got there, there's no such thing as a hymn anymore. It's all completely secular nowadays. So supposed assembly in the schools, to me, assembly means it's got something to do with God, but not anymore, which is very sad.
So your parents weren't religious or had no religious
Oh,
inclination?
well, my dad was from a Catholic family. My mother was from a Protestant family of some sort, but they weren't like, well, my dad's family were churchgoers. So apparently when I was little, I was, done the thing that they do to you in the Protestant church somehow,
Christened,
confirmed or christened,
baptized, yeah.
And that didn't go down well with the other side of the family. But then, as I said, there were, like assemblies all the time at school, but I didn't get grabbed by anything particularly, as a child. But
so as a teenager, when you started to come home and question things, and you got involved with Transcendental Meditation, and then you joined the Hare Krishnas, what was your, you mentioned that your dad didn't like anything Indian, but your parents generally, what did they think about the whole thing?
Well, my dad would have killed me, would have killed my mother, because he was a violent alcoholic, actually, my dad. That's another thing about my childhood that was very disturbing, being the eldest child particularly. What did they think about it? My mum and she's just recently died, like I told you before we went on air. And, when I think about it, and if I cry a bit, don't worry, it's clean pain. She was so understanding. And, she let me go. She let me go. And she always supported me, even though I went through so much CRA asterisk. CRA asterisk. She never questioned my decision, and she did devotional service. The whole family became vegetarians soon after I joined. And
wow, your mother
just
became
an amazing
vegetarian.
Person, yeah, the whole family became vegetarian. Some of my sisters did waver when they got married to their blokes, but some of them didn't, and one of them's a vegan. And yeah, so it was a very new thing, and everyone thought it was crazy. It was a crazy thing to be a Hare Krishna. It really, really was,
Well, It's still relatively new now, but in terms of 1972, you're talking Prabhupada 65, 7 years in the West, 5 years in the UK, 4 years, sorry, in the UK. Extremely new.
My mom just trusted me, I suppose. I mean, she was a very accepting person, the sweetest person, the most. I think the biggest sacrifice I made actually to join the movement was leaving my mom.
So did you, 1972, when you went to join the movement, you moved into a temple, did you that you then left school, so to speak? You didn't do A levels or anything like that?
Well, no, I'd done three months of the A level courses, and I just was leaving because that was what you had to do. I mean, I just got bowled over by Krishna consciousness, and I'm sure that's still happening to people now. You just get bowled over by it. Radhana Swami tells a very nice story in his book, and I've listened to the audio version of it, you know, the one where he explains how, I forget which one it is, he tells his life story. Anyway, he's saying that he was in Bombay, I think it was, and all of a sudden, you know, how you used to walk around in Indian, you know, cloth and all that, and you had no money or anything. And he said he was waiting to cross the road, and all of a sudden a guy grabbed him by the neck like that, and he was, you know, sort of going in his ear, you know, with some sort of corkscrew type thing, pulled it out. All of a sudden, Maharaj is saying, all the sounds that I hadn't been able to hear before, they came into my ear. He'd cleaned his ears, you know. So he said, it's like that, like when you join the movement, when Krishna gets you, you know, it's like you just begin to live and you do anything to experience more of that. But the thing is, as Maharaj goes on to explain, the guy wanted a rupee to do the second ear. So he said you know, the rest of the purification, the rest of the, you know, taste you have to pay for. And yeah. So I was just bowled over by it, and, you know, it just had to be like so many of people before and since, it just had to be that I had to follow this.
So tell us a bit about, so you were initiated in 1972?
Well, I moved in on my birthday, so 2nd of February 1973, and I was initiated in the May.
So tell us a bit about that in terms of your initiation and how it happened, and did you meet Prabhupada, or was a letter sent with your name on it? How did all that happen? I hadn't
met Prabhupada yet, but a letter was sent. And the names came back, and it was quite amusing now in retrospect, because the temple president said, you know, the letter's here with your name from Prabhupada, and would you like to keep the letter? Because there are 4 or 5 people in the letter. Would you like to keep the letter? And I said, I'm too fallen to keep the letter. So of course I really regret that. I was just trying to learn to be a devotee, learn to be humble and all that, whatever. What an idiot. Yeah.
Wow. So where did your initiation happen? Where did it take place?
The ceremony, you know, took place in Scotland, in the temple at Forest Road, which was previously it had been a spiritualist church. So there were a lot of spooky vibes in the, you know, you came off the street down a sort of a little alleyway, really. And then you came on through a door and up the stairs, and on that first floor, you can still see it now from the outside, very impressive sort of Gothic windows, and it was quite a high room. And so the fire sacrifice took place in there, and it was either Paramahamsa Swami or Parivrajacharya Swami who did the fire, because they used to go about in a pair. The 2 of them used to go everywhere together. So one of them did the fire. Yeah.
Wow, quite amazing. Okay, and so in terms of getting involved with Krishna consciousness, your initiation, being part of the Hare Krishna movement for half a century, it's a long time. What was it that attracted you to Krishna consciousness?
It was Krishna who just got a hold of me. I mean, you know, there's no other way of saying it, really. It was Krishna that just got a hold of me, and that was it. It was blissful. It was extremely blissful. Of course, I didn't realize that you had to pay for the other ear. I didn't realize that. This is great. And I remember that we thought, I mean, you know, I wasn't one of the very earliest, you know, people to join in England, but still, you know, we were all under the impression that that was it, you know, give us 5 years, we're going to be there, you know, because we were so much in bliss already.
Is your name in this book? This is Rancho Prime's book.
Yeah.
And it's what's very useful is at the end, I think it's at the end. There's a list of all the disciples of Srila Prabhupada in Britain. I want to find it easy without having to. And I think there was around 300 of you.
That's right. Yeah.
Around 200 men and 100 women.
Yeah.
Which in those days was a very good split, actually, if you think about it. Oh, I can see. Let me see if I can see your name. 73, and I'm going to literally 73. There you are. I'm not sure if I can show everybody this. Your name is there.
Yeah.
Can't see it very clearly, but that's your name.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I want to say in the nicest possible way, congratulations, because 50 years is a long time, and I'd be very keen to know of those 300 people. Obviously, quite a few might have passed away now.
Yeah.
But who are still practicing, who are still involved with Krishna consciousness, and that number would whittle down quite a bit. I've tried to find that out with some of my own research in terms of the number of, I don't know, Prabhupada disciples in Britain still practicing, and I don't have a number, if I'm honest, what that number is. But yeah, it's great. I think it's very encouraging that you are still practicing. I mean, 50 years is quite a long time. So you mentioned just now a bit about so how long did you then live in the temple? What happened?
Well, I didn't live there very long there, because I got married off after 7 weeks.
Married off?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said what it was that this is not very nice, but it was very sort of anti-women, because like the devotees from Manchester who I'd made friends with after having visited them for 2 weeks, obviously, most days I would come over from Preston. I must have gone over, say, 6-7 times, and done service, made bead bags and book bags for them, and just sort of got involved, and I considered them to be my friends. And so they took me up to Edinburgh, and I was taken care of by Sarva Mangala, who I want to give a shout out to. She's always been so kind to me from that day on. She's very, very kind to me. And yes, so after about 3 days, Mangalarti one morning, the brahmacharis from Manchester weren't there anymore. And I said to Sarva, where are the brahmacharis from Manchester? She said, oh, they've gone. I said, why didn't they say goodbye? She said, oh, brahmacharis don't talk to women. And that was the moment that I realized that I was a woman. And I thought I was just a person. I'd actually genuinely thought that I was just a person. So, I mean, the more you were there and the more you listened, the more you were just sort of like degraded. You were just like really worth nothing. And so my material desires were not very far under the surface. I'd never done anything about them. Before I joined, because I wanted to make a success in my life and go to university and all that, because I was quite academic, at school. But they just came up, and I didn't make any moves. But the temple president said to me, have you ever thought of getting married in Krishna consciousness, right? After 7 weeks. And I said, to who? He said, to a very nice boy. So I thought I'd better say yes, because nobody else may ever ask me. I was 17 years old. So I ended up getting married. So eventually we moved out to stay with some other people that were the other one Grihasta couple in Edinburgh, and then we got our own place in Dundee. And then we went to my mum's for a bit because there's nowhere to go. And then no, that's not true. That came after. Then we went to Leicester, and then we went to the manor. Hang on, the manor opened at one point, and when it opened, we went there.
I think the manor opened in 73. I'm not sure which month.
Yeah, so before the manor opened, we were married, and we'd been in Dundee, so we must have gone to. Perhaps we went to the manor after we were in Dundee, because we just somehow couldn't find anywhere to live in Edinburgh.
So you got married at the age of 17.
Yeah.
What did your mum and dad think about that?
Well, they didn't get any. They didn't have any say in it, really.
Because so it was an arranged marriage. It was an arranged marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know the person. And all these things that were completely par for the course, you know. And I think today there are still things going on which are par for the course, but in future generations there will be, the people will be astonished as you are now, hearing what I just told you.
So you mentioned about 3 or 4 minutes ago that it, as in the movement, ISKCON, was so anti-women. Is it still anti-women now?
Yeah.
Well, you and I have certainly had long chats about that before. It depends how much you kind of want to go into now, but I'm not surprised to hear you say that. And in one sense, I don't have the view that the Hare Krishna movement should be like the world, definitely not. But also, I'm a big supporter of modernization and trying to do things differently. Certainly in Western culture, certainly in the villages of India, where things have been the same for thousands of years, fine. But I'm not living in a village in India. I'm living in a village in Somerset. You know, things are very different, very different. And
now your last question is like, what do you think, or how can we get more people in the West involved? And I don't want to jump to that question right away and jump the gun, but that is how. That's a very, very major, very, very major way that we can get people in the West to be favorable. I read something recently which was oh gosh, I wish I had it with me, which was to do with people becoming favorable, and that supporters, they were called, you know. And I think it was Prabhupada's books. It may have been a follower of Prabhupada, but it was a very clear message that, you know, somebody who is a supporter of the devotees, you know, that counts in Krishna's eyes. And how can you get somebody in the right mind? I don't even support it, you know. I don't even support the you know, some of the very painful and harmful things, not only to the individuals, male and female, but also to the movement. If you can't get people, if you can't get people who are in the movement on board, how can you get the rest of the population on board? They're not going to, you know, be impressed. I mean, I want to mention one thing, which has nothing to do with the women thing, but a few years ago, I was like, you know, trying to get involved in the Krishna Avanti project, and we were in a taxi. There were 4 Indian gentlemen and myself in a taxi, and on the way, I was just sort of like, you know, tagging along. We got a taxi from A to B, and the person that was leading us, and I don't mean Naveen Krishna, but another guy that was leading us. And the talk was of, you know, the grant from the government and all the rest of it. We got out of the taxi and just walked away, and the taxi driver didn't get tipped. And to this day, I feel bad about that. I mean, if you don't keep the habits that basic, decent people do in the country where you're trying to spread the word, to make a splash, I mean, what hope is there, you know? And I feel bad. I mean, I was thinking, should I give him a person, give him something in 2 or 3 quid? It's just rude, you know? And if these are the people that want to get on board, we're going to have to step up, really.
Well, you're
even touching the woman thing.
You're preaching to a member of the choir.
Well, I know I am. That's why I dare say it. You know,
I've been saying those things probably not as long as you, but I've been saying those things for a while.
Came back to me just a couple of days ago, and I just thought,
well, I think certainly in the past I've been quite guilty of living in a bit of a bubble.
Well, haven't we all?
And I was chatting to 2 friends who are professional people in their own right, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and I did a live thing on the Hare Krishna project page about how can we appeal to Westerners. And I chatted to 2 friends about, what do you think of the Hare Krishna movement? One's a TV broadcaster, and the other one is like a mental health nurse. And they both basically said that nobody takes the Hare Krishna seriously. You're just a fringe group. You're just weird, you know, irrespective of the clothing or like that. You're just sort of a weird fringe group, you know. And like my bubble was really burst at that point, you know. Yeah. So I
saw that. I watched that. That, and that's what sort of made me get back in touch with you. You know, a few months ago.
Let's come on to that a bit more a bit later,
yes.
In terms of reaching out to Westerners. And I also kind of appreciate what you've told us about your mum. When I joined the Hare Krishna movement, I took the view that it's not really good to show emotions. Because, you know, no one else is showing emotion in the Hare Krishna movement. And, you know, we're not the body, everything's temporary and all these things come and go and everything. And I had that view for a number of years. And then one day I was reading a letter when Srila Prabhupada Sannyas Guru passed away, Keshava Maharaj, in 1969, Prabhupada wrote a letter to his disciples to say, I'm really sorry for your loss. And I'm really, really sad to hear about what's happened. And you could really feel the sadness in Prabhupada's letter, that Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, the savior of the Western world, was showing emotion. And I thought, wow, Srila Prabhupada, who we all idolize, is showing emotion. Therefore, it's okay for me to show emotion. I can show emotion towards my family. So I just wanted to, I know I mentioned that to you earlier, but I wanted to say that. Can we rewind a bit? So how long were you married to your husband that you married at 17?
I was married to him for 12 years, but the last few of the 12 years, I mean, I was sort of trying to get away from him because of various difficulties, all kinds of difficulties, but I didn't manage it, and I was back and forth, and there was kind of a tug of war. Because you mentioned about the emotion thing, well, we've all been there. And I think the harmful thing in the early movement was that people in charge of the temple were in charge of you as well. They were in charge of each individual. So if you wanted to be in a temple community, you had to obey and like that. And so that was part of it, being charged with getting away from the person I was married to, who was the father of my 2 children, then my 3 children, then my 4 children. And there were, other factors involved, which I don't want to go into, just now, but it was extremely, extremely disturbing to this day. To this day, it's extremely disturbing.
And is that man still in the Hare Krishna movement? Is he?
No, because I mean, if you don't have a broad palette, if the leaders don't have a broad palette, you're not going to achieve. If you just have and I'm not saying it because I resent anybody in the past who was leading and who followed a certain tack, because things were as they were, and I'm sure it doesn't happen nowadays. But if you have a vision like that, you're only going to get a small. But then there's another factor, which is that I think that it was extremely purifying for me. It's all the difficulties I've been through in my life, and you can read this in Prabhupada's books over and over in different places. He'll say it, that these difficulties are sent by Krishna to purify us. And I'm still hoping that Krishna will fish me out of the material world, because he has destroyed me. So I just hope he's going to fish me out the rest of what's left. Yeah, I don't know if that points sufficiently the way that I'm trying to highlight.
Well, I really appreciate your honesty, by the way, and some of the things you're sharing is certainly a similar. It's not the same. We did a podcast on, I think it was on mental health quite a while ago, and it was amazing how the number of devotees then got in touch with the person I was interviewing privately about mental health issues and being abused in the Hare Krishna, in a number of ways, abused.
Absolutely.
And it was horrifying, but also then not surprising. I've been, I haven't been dealing with personally, but I think I've been seeing how ISKCON's dealt with a particular issue recently around paedophilia. And I've just been shocked how ISKCON has covered up or tried to cover up or not dealt with it. And back in the 70s or 80s or 90s, they would have been successful because the internet didn't exist. You couldn't just text somebody or WhatsApp, but now you can't hide these things. It's social media. You and I can communicate with somebody in South Korea in an instant through technology. Things can't be hidden anymore. And I'm just kind of sad how ISKCON hasn't dealt with that particular issue.
Well, I think that comes with the fact that, you see, one thing I was thinking earlier today was that, you'll excuse me if I use a very broad generic term, but like the male intelligence is very two-dimensional to me, whereas the female intelligence is very broad. It's a great big spectrum. And if you get people quite naturally, male people, who are sannyasis or whatever they are, leading the movement to a huge percentage and pushing on in a certain way, a lot of damage is going to be done. There's been a lot of fallout, in the families. And when ISKCON was 50 years old, I remember seeing on the ISKCON communications email something that there'd been a big conference with these ISKCON sannyasis like Krishna Kshetra Swami and people that had had an education in the meantime, and academics from outside. And it was sort of, highlighted that the family hasn't been given enough emphasis. And in my day, certainly, the family was not given. This is why I hate the word Mataji. I mean, don't make us be called that when you wouldn't let us look after our children when we had them. No. And I'm not saying it because I resent anyone. I'm just saying it because even though I accept everything that's happened, I still got to live with it.
Can you you just mentioned that they wouldn't let you look after your children. So the children were, what do you mean by that? Just so people understand.
What I mean with that, like in Bhagavatam class, you can't just call anything devotional service. Whereas now, because it's different times, now sannyasis say that your children are your service, and that's quite right. But they weren't allowed to be our service. And so you had to bring them up as best you could, on the sidelines. And, being a very sort of easily led person, which they say that women are, and I accept that completely. I wanted to be approved of. I wasn't one of the ones that said, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I'll just do my own thing, and you can go to hell." And I'll do my own. I wanted to belong. I wanted to do what was right, but it's just a period that ISKCON had to go through, and it was walking through fire. When the children, the vulnerable parts of society, when they were walking through that fire, it hurt them more. It hurt them more than it hurt the strong-minded people who only see good and bad, the sannyasis, or with all respect to them. And so in this thing, 50 years after ISKCON's inception, there was a conference, and it highlighted that the family needed to be given more, emphasis, and that's certainly true. And nobody did it out of malice, but we've still got to live with the fallout, haven't we? And I think it should be talked about. It should be talked about, because otherwise we're not being honest. I told you how blissful it was that Krishna got hold of me, and there was no other way that I had to join the movement, because Krishna was calling me and holding me in his embrace, and so on and so forth. But there's real pain, because of the way that things were in a brand new movement. Prabhupada was thinking of addressing the leaders, of the West, and he ended up attracting very young people, who were good to go. They were ready to go and go all out. And that has done a lot of damage. And I think we should be talking about that, because I consider that my sacrifice. I consider that to be a sacrifice, even if I made it without really knowing what I was doing. And in terms of mental health, one of your questions is, what are you doing now? I'm just really doing my mental health. I try to get over everything.
It's a very strong word, but I'm going to use it as trauma.
Oh yeah.
You've talked a lot about trauma in our interview today, and how things have been traumatic in 50 years in the Hare Krishna, and that's why I applaud you that you're still here with us in the Hare Krishna movement. I think it's amazing, and I know I've mentioned this before a few times, but I'm all in favor of women being positions of authority. Absolutely. I think women generally probably make better leaders. They're much more empathetic than men. There was this article was written about a year ago. It was about the first year of COVID, and which countries dealt with the pandemic better. And 5 countries run by women that just generally dealt with it better in terms of a whole number of ways. And you thought, wow, it was just very interesting. And
but I don't think men have got intuition. They don't have access to intuition. I was thinking of an example, as happened to me, like it was going to be my son's birthday, and it was like, we don't have any money. He can't have a present, because there's no money. He can't have a present. That was from the husband. And I just knew he had to have a present no matter if there was no money. So it's like you have to, we've got much better view. I'm not saying that I think that I'm, better than a man, equal to, none of that nonsense. I just wanted to be my own self, and personally I don't want any power. I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in, if possible, people can just leave, butt out of my life, just butt out of telling me like what to do, what to wear, what to be called, no. Because I could do a better job on my own of, intuiting my way through my married and family life.
So in terms of you mentioned mental health, that you're doing your mental health now, but in terms of you live in the north of England. You've did some of the name of the town, but I've forgotten. Is it Scarborough?
Scarborough.
You live in Scarborough. There's a song about Scarborough, isn't there?
There is.
You used to sing it at school, but I've forgotten the words. Scarborough. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? That was it. Wow, that was some time ago. And you live in Scarborough, and are you involved in any kind of namahata or preaching, or do you?
Not now. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, but my sort of a lady who could be a Harinam partner has just finished her studying, so we might perhaps go out together.
That's good. That's good. And I've certainly over the years on Facebook seen you in different places in the north doing Harinams.
I mean, before COVID, we used to go everywhere and cost a bomb, all the petrol and everything. Go to all kinds of places and do Harinam everywhere, because that it really is personally, a very favorite activity of mine.
Yeah, I read something today.
Because I feel like, Lord Chaitanya is with me. I feel his presence,
Yeah, I was reminded of something earlier. I read a Prabhupada quote somewhere online this morning where Prabhupada says Harinam Sankirtan is the most important service. It's more important than temple services, administration. Harinam Sankirtan has to come first. Lord Chaitanya's movement is a street-based movement. It's about being out on the streets. It's not about necessarily being in temples or buildings. It's a street-based movement.
The thing is, there's controversy now about that, isn't there? And I was likening my feelings on Harinam to my feelings when I used to be a dancer, because I learned Bharatanatyam, and I was basically, how to put this, I was like, a pioneer of Bharatanatyam, in Europe. And when I would be performing, it's not like as if I had every facility to learn that skill and even to practice it and to perform. But when I was doing it, I just felt like, in myself, I felt like totally unworthy, and I just felt like that it had to come through me. It had to come through me. And it's the same on the Harinam, because I feel like I'm just an old woman, and sometimes I'd be on my own or with one other person. I'm thinking, it's just not cool what I'm doing, and my voice is not, in tune properly, because when I first started singing. But still, I really feel Lord Chaitanya's presence. So it's like, for me, it's kind of like it's a slap down, as I said, for the ego. It's a slap down for the ego, because it's not cool. I mean, it is cool when, when some young people do it, and there's a few of them and they're dancing. I can't really dance now. My legs have gone, my knees have gone, my back's gone. But just the holy name, to me, it is, the holy name is a presence, and he needs a vehicle to come through, or he kindly uses us. So just talking about it with you has reminded me, and maybe be able to get out again. I'll be able to get out again and do that. So it's encouraged me, you saying that, because you think, how is this going to change anything? Because you get so many voices against it, don't you, in the movement?
Well, I think I've been living in another bubble, because I haven't heard much about that. I've seen that. Bizarrely, I listened to a talk by Bhaktivinoda Swami yesterday, where he was criticizing the voices in the movement that are critical of Harinam, and I think I just haven't heard them. I know one or two that might be critical of Harinam, but I if I'm honest, I hadn't been conscious that there was an increase in those voices.
Maybe there isn't.
Try not to name any names. I know there's probably one or two sannyasis that are not in favor of it. My view is very much that it is the tried and tested and best way for sharing Krishna consciousness liberally on the streets. So it's the critic. I know one or two critics of it. They haven't found yet a different USP. They haven't found that yet. So Harinam Sankirtan is still the best way. It's great. It's great to see big temples in the UK full with people doing kirtan, but all those people are the choir. That analogy, they're the choir. I remember chatting to one brahmachari at the manor about 6 years ago, and I was in the minibus and I was picking up some people to go on a Harinam, and I said, "Oh, you coming on the Harinam?" So I haven't got time. I'm sweeping the stairs or something like that. And I felt very sad, actually. He wanted to come, but he had all these kind of cleaning services to do around the temple. Yeah.
Well, that's encouraged me a lot to get back out there, you know, get my head together and get back out.
Good. And people are very receptive. I was talking to somebody recently who's a journalist about how there's generally religions are having an uptake in some interest from the public, because after the pandemic, or it's not over yet, people are asking questions about God and heaven and hell and the meaning of life, and you know, so there is an increase in interest from the public. You know, and luckily we live in a country where you can, you know, do what you want.
Absolutely. I mean, really, that's one thing that goes through my mind, because some places you're not allowed.
Yeah.
That's inconceivable. And even when I joined the movement, we used to get my first day out on Harinam, I got arrested. And we were in the paper. There was 4 of us who got in the paper. There was Dirashanta Swami, I think it was Varaha Murthy, another brahmachari, myself, Sarva Mangala. We were in the paper because we went to court. We got arrested. We went to court. That was my first day out in Edinburgh. I mean, I'd been out actually in Manchester with the other devotees, but first day as a devotee, we went on Harinam, and that was it. We got arrested.
So what were you arrested actually for? Disturbing the peace?
Because it was, I don't know what the name of the offense was, you know, obstruction or something like that, you know. Oh yeah. And even nowadays, like if I'm on the rare occasion that I might be out with books, you know, by the side of a Harinam or whatever, and you see policemen just walking by, I do have to do a double take even now, because, you know, like we would get arrested for that kind of stuff. You know, a nice thing is that there's something that comes up in the Prabhupada Conversations, 1977, and the devotees, I think in London, had got arrested, and it was brought to Prabhupada's attention. I think he got a letter saying, or from Sakshi Gopal Das, you know, the English devotee, and this Sakshi Gopal had defended, you know, the cause of Lord Chaitanya in the court, and convinced the judge, and Prabhupada was saying, our men can convince people in the courts. So that's a nice thing to have happened.
I mean, I don't want to come across as too patriotic, but I like living in Britain in the sense it's a country where you can be any religion you want. You can do what you want within reason. I mean, and actually in terms of countries in Europe, it's not completely universal. I was in, I remember my first visit to the ISKCON temple in Paris about 7 years ago. So we knew where it was because we drove down, and I had it on the sat nav, and we took us there. And then we kind of got to this street, and it was a residential street. Me and my friend, we got out and we were walking up and down the street looking for this Hare Krishna ISKCON temple, and there was no sign, there was no directions. And then we walked past the house, and then that house had lots of shoes outside. there was about 20 pairs of shoes outside. That might be a Hare Krishna temple. And then we just walked into this garden, and we saw the deities through the window. But so France, even though it talks about kind of you know, freedom of expression and freedom of religion, is actually quite secular, more secular than us. You know, in France, you can't necessarily publicly be what you want to be.
No, like when I went over to New Mayapur a few years ago, we were going out for the weekly Harinam in the nearest big town, which was over an hour away. And, you know, we had permission to chant if we kept going, if we kept moving up and down the street, I think once a week. So it's not like here when, you know, if I wander into town, there's no one going to say, I mean, shopkeepers might occasionally approach me, but it's not like an official thing that you're not allowed to do this. Yay.
Can we talk a bit about, I guess the last bit then really is what do you think we can do to attract more people to Krishna consciousness?
Well, go on Harinam more for a start. You just convinced me about. Go on Harinam more. And, well, it's got to do with how to treat the women, you know, and also when you were talking about France and stuff and living in England, it made me remember that when we joined, I mean, all the leaders of the movement, or many of the top leaders were American, and that is actually, in retrospect, it's another culture, you know, and the people that can, just like the Indian culture, you know, so it's 2 different cultures that we're trying to propagate, supposedly, but really it's not that we're trying to propagate, is it? It's actually Krishna, God, in our hearts, and how that manifests outwardly. So I think the people that actually have a handle on the cultural behavior of England, can possibly, like Kripa Moya, he's very British, and therefore he knows the mentality of the Brits, and he can address them in such a way that they can relate to him, that kind of thing. And the way that women are treated, I mean, it's just, it's appalling, actually.
Okay.
Do you want me to go into detail? I'm sure you don't need me.
If you want to, I know it's something we had a chat about a few weeks ago in terms of the treatment of women. And you see, I'll be very blunt and honest with you. So I was having a conversation with someone about 6 months ago or a year ago about racism. And I said, well, I don't think there's much racism. I don't think that.
With whom did you say? I missed the person because it was going funny.
Just with a friend. I was chatting with a friend about racism in Britain. I remember thinking, well, I don't think there's much racism in the UK. And then it suddenly clicked, I am a white man. I am in the least discriminated group in the world, probably. So of course I'm not gonna experience racism or experience sexism. And I haven't. I think once about 4 years ago, I was walking around London and these young black boys shouted at me, white privilege. And I was like, oh my God, what's other than that, I've seen or experienced nothing. So I really appreciate it when devotees like you, feel the strength to talk about issues that you're uncomfortable about. And I am not a woman. So I've certainly not in this life. So I've not experienced some of the things that you've experienced. So I was, a bit, I don't know if it's shocked, intrigued by some of the things that we spoke about a few weeks ago in terms of the treatment of women in the movement.
Yeah.
If you want to share some of those things about now and some of the things that you see.
What I will do is I've got a little note here which talks about things. It's not directly about women, but it's have you heard of this thing called Wisdom of the Sages?
Yes.
It's amazing. I mean, and this is a really good way to get a hold of Westerners. It's completely contemporary. It's just so attractive. And that's the kind of, it's very American, obviously, but that is just the way to get Westerners to, prick their ears up, because the team of the two guys that run it are just like a perfect team. And one thing that I saw was that they had one episode, they had rewritten, or Kastuba had rewritten the 10 offenses so that you could really understand them, and he hadn't changed the meaning of them at all, but they were just in language that a Westerner can understand. And I think it's time that we had more of that. And that really, I mean, I would like to get a copy of those, actually. They just really spoke to you, and you could get what they meant, because Srila Prabhupada's language is not the language of modern day English speakers from anywhere. And I don't know, when I've heard devotees try to, Prabhupada's using words in a different way. And that's another thing that in the Wisdom of the Sages, I've heard them say, when Prabhupada says envious, it means hostile, and they'll explain that, and that's sorted, it's all right, it's in a box now, we got it. But no, it's always got to be like, many times I've heard, like trying to attach the actual meaning of envious, for example, to what Prabhupada said when he really means hostile. Because what, I'm reading Conan Doyle, I'm reading the stories of Sherlock Holmes to my husband, and they're so amazing. And in that time, Conan Doyle was born 1830, I think, and he's calling Watson, Sherlock Holmes is calling Watson his very intimate friend. And that is a phrase that Prabhupada would use. And various words I found in that reading, which correspond to Srila Prabhupada's use of language, but now the language has changed. And so we shouldn't be afraid I've been in groups, reading groups where devotees are just trying to screw out, that's script, trying to screw out a meaning, which is actually not intended. Because I am a bit of a linguist myself, that's been my job. And I mean, that for me is just like so obvious when people are not on board with that. I'll just throw out a couple of things. I hate to lower the tone, really, but
we will end on a high, I promise you.
Okay, well, you know, when the Bhagavad Gita 10:34, the verse is talking about women's qualities, and these are the qualities of women, you know, and that in the BBT version has been changed in the purport. I think it's the purport that says, if any woman has these qualities, then she becomes very whatever, you know, but it's been changed to any person. When I saw that, I thought, well, have they not got enough? Have men not got enough? And the thing is, when you put a woman down, and this is what I'm recovering from, trying to anyway, when you put a woman down, you're damaging her, not only her, but her children as well. The second thing I'd like to share is that there's a podcast called Off the Altar, which is hilarious name. Have you ever seen it?
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
It's called the Hare Krishna Feminist Podcast. I think we've only done 2 or 3. And there was a girl on there that's been on the Wisdom of the Sages. Her name is Danya, and she is an astounding second generation devotee, just a wonderful person. And she was in Mayapur, and she's had an education and everything, and she's a counselor, and she's very accomplished. She's a young woman. And she tells the story on this Off the Altar podcast where she's in Mayapur doing the Bhakti Shastri, like putting herself out big time. And she's in the temple room chanting her japa in the morning program, and she's got her eyes closed, and someone taps her on the knee. And it's a woman saying to her, "Excuse me, I just wanted to tell you that if you wear gopi skirts, you're going to be considered not a serious devotee. So for your own good, you should wear saris." And this goes to chant her japa. I mean, what is that? Because something that really annoys me is the women apologists for the men. Let's get up, because I know this is a fact. Without giving you the background, women need to actually be approved of and to belong and everything. So, you know, women are in such a hurry to belong to the straight and narrow that they can't open their spectrum to be women, to actually be women. And that wasn't their idea. I heard someone giving a talk saying we don't have to act like men, as if it was our idea to act like men. You see, it wasn't our idea to act like men. It was because there was like that, you know, that was being a devotee. And my final point is that, you know, women are like children, because so many things are cherry picked from Srila Prabhupada's, you know, work. Let me just talk first about one class of Prabhupada on one of his spiritual masters, either appearance or disappearance days. He starts off, you know, saying there's not, you know, even a normal person doesn't disappear. Sorry, yeah, because we're all living eternally, and you know, so my spiritual master's not disappeared. And he ends that class in tears and can't even speak. So there is the philosophy of the soul, but there's also the person. I mean, if Prabhupada had not been love personified, he would never have attracted any disciples, you know. So we have not been mature enough, and we've not had the spectrum, and the women can really help with that, to care for the whole person, the whole family, the whole society, you know. And those of us who've been forced into that need to heal from it. That's what I'm doing. The other thing that I was going to go into, the point I was actually going to make, I've actually lost it now, but that was a very good point, wasn't it? That's all right. It might come back.
And in terms of your own healing.
I've got it. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
What it is, women are like children. This comes from Srila Prabhupada's books, and I agree with that. I agree with everything Prabhupada says, by the way. You know, I do, because there's ways of looking at it. If you look at it from a misogynist way, it's going to hurt the women. If you look at it from a protective way, it's going to protect them. So women are like children, yeah, because we need love. You know, and if we don't get love, care, protection, being surrounded, being embraced, you know, metaphorically, you know, we're going to suffer, and our children are going to suffer. So this women are like children is just used to beat us over the head that we can't, you know, we can't make any decisions about our own babies or anything, you know. So that's just like a little shot, you know, a little shot in the dark. People can, you know, you can do what you want with it. But so many of Prabhupada's statements, and those statements can be understood. Like, for example, and I will finish on this, you shouldn't sit with your mother, sister, or daughter in a solitary place. Yeah. Now, that has been used to make women feel like they're dirty. In fact, you know, It's protection, because if you do sit with somebody in a solitary place and they abuse you, you as the woman are the one who's never going to come back from that. So it's all in the eyes of the beholder.
And in terms of your own healing, how are you getting support for that? Do you have a friendship group in the Hare Krishna movement, supportive devotees?
Well, I have a friend who's supportive. I'm working the 12 steps. I've had some therapy, some of which has been better than others, but I had some on a national health. I waited for someone and she was brilliant, but you only get a certain amount of time. And I do the 12 steps, outside and inside the movement. And that's all about taking responsibility for your own behavior. And the reason why I can't, if something's harmed me very much in the past, I can't be part of that now. This is why I try and keep to myself, because it's just very silly to be going back into the same pool and expecting to not get hurt. That's just really silly. So I have to be in charge of my own healing and be true, to myself.
Okay, which is good. Yeah, and I quite admire your independence. I think is the best way to put it. Being involved with a temple isn't always a good idea. For a number of reasons. Let's end on a bit of a high.
Yes, let's do that.
So you're in Scarborough. You're hopefully encouraged to go on Harinam, which is fab. You're a bit of a stalwart of Harinams, and your husband's also devotee as well.
Yeah.
Fab. And is he keen on Harinams as well?
He's retired from it. It's not his thing.
That's fair enough. And you mentioned when we spoke a few weeks ago, you mentioned there's a devotee kind of living nearby in Saltburn.
Yeah.
Saltburn. They do. She's running successful programs there.
It is, yes.
Yeah, I saw that some photos the other day on the ISKCON small groups Facebook group of those, and it looked like a really well attended program as well. And there's certainly a lot of stuff happening in the north of England, as wonderful as it is, that is happening in terms of preaching to attract Western people, which is really good, because the kind of sobering statistic, I've mentioned this before, the sobering statistic in the UK, the number of practitioners of Krishna consciousness in the UK is around 0.002% of the population. So as wonderful as Krishna conscious is, it's not something to celebrate in that kind of grand way. There's still a lot of work to be done, and it's kind of easy to get sucked into the bubbles of temples. Bhaktivedanta Manor, you can go to Bhaktivedanta Manor and you suddenly think the whole world is devotees, and they're absolutely not. And there's so much work to be done in terms of preaching and sharing Krishna consciousness with a new audience. I went to a school. I ran a school program in Wiltshire last week, and myself and a few other devotees were invited in to chant with the kids. They were teenagers, and it was wonderful. There was 100 teenagers chanting Hare Krishna with us, and this was a very white middle-class town, and there's so many opportunities to do things like that, preaching opportunities and sharing Krishna consciousness. Well, Govardhan, we've been chatting for just over an hour now, believe it or not. And I really appreciate you coming on the podcast this week, and sharing your story with us. I won't mention her name, but you remind me of another Prabhupada disciple that also got married, arranged marriage at the age of 17. And 50 years later, she's still practicing Krishna consciousness. She listens to these podcasts, so she might know who she is. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. And hopefully at some point I will come up to Scarborough or nearby.
Yes.
And we can chant together.
Let's do that.
It's not illegal yet. And you don't have to get special permission. Well, the mantra is
that's a
free.
blessing. What a blessing.
Yes. So a big thank you to everyone who's tuned into this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast, episode number 38. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do like it and put a positive comment and share the link. And if you're watching this on Facebook, also put a positive comment, share on your own Facebook wall, your Facebook groups or pages, and you can like, love, or care for it. The 3 different positive emotions or emojis that you can show in reference to this podcast. So until next week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast, we'll see you soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.